And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily. Appreciate you guys joining us here at the Upside Sports Network. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you're new here to the channel. Welcome in, one and all. Welcome in, Mark. Once again, appreciate you joining us once again and following us over there on Facebook. Notice you've been liking some of our stuff that we've been posting over there. So if you want to follow that over there and just like the page, we do post when we do go live out there as well. So we do appreciate those of you when you interact with us out there in social media. But let's get to some of the big headlines of the day, shall we? First and foremost is the non-tender deadline today. Names are still rolling in as far as who will not be tendered a contract for next season, and we already have a few major surprises there. We'll start off the top with the Toronto Blue Jays. They have decided to non-tender Jordan Romano. There was a non-zero chance, according to some writers out there, that Jordan Romano could receive or could be non-tendered anyway at the deadline. And ultimately, the Blue Jays have chosen to go that route. They decided to save the money. They want to reinvest that and see what else they can do in free agency. They are going to be a very aggressive team this offseason. Whether that means via trade or free agency remains to be seen. I believe it's going to mean both. But this is the first domino to fall for the Toronto Blue Jays. They're going to have to add another piece of that bullpen now with Romano hitting the free agent market. They already have a couple of spots that they're looking to fill in both rotation and in their lineup. This adds one more big need item to their winter shopping list. Other guys who are non-tendered today, and as I mentioned, the list keeps growing. The Braves have non-tendered Ramon Laureano and Griffin Canning. Remember, Griffin Canning best with his time with the LA Angels. Laureano his best time with the Oakland A's. Both have had subpar years, we'll call it. But overall, the non-tender guys that you're seeing go out there are either injured or coming off of injury, or they just don't have the money to be able to keep those guys around. The one team that I'm a little bit surprised made a couple of moves anyway was the Colorado Rockies. They decided to go ahead and non-tender Cal Quantrill. They also decided to non-tender Brendan Rodgers. Remember, he was a top 5 pick a few years back anyway. Ultimately, never really caught on at the big leagues as far as the production that they were hoping for. They were thinking they had drafted the next great shortstop out there. A guy like Alex Bregman is what they were hoping for. Ultimately, it just did not work out for them. And at $5.5 million, that's the reason why I'm a little bit surprised that the Rockies went this route. Who exactly are they going to, have taking those at bats? I know they've got some pieces there already in place, but they had so much promise in him. They had so much belief in him as far as being able to lift that organization up offensively. And while it hadn't worked out, I'll give you that. To give up on him at this point is a little bit of a red flag for that organization, among many red flags that we've seen. We'll put a pin in the Rockies conversation, but that's something that needs to be revisited in a whole full-length video. But the other big headline is the trade that we saw today between the Kansas City Royals and the Cincinnati Reds. Royals did great in this one as far as I'm concerned. They got a bat in their lineup, which they desperately needed at second base in Jonathan India. And this finally ends the Jonathan India trade saga. He finally has a home. He's not sitting there looking over his shoulder saying, hey guys, am I getting traded to Seattle? Am I getting traded to Chicago? Am I going to Kansas City? You sending me out west? Or am I staying here? Those were all on the table for the past 2+ years, and you got to think that had been some type of a mental drain, at least from that side of things for Jonathan India. Ultimately, it sounds like he's found a home, at least for the time being anyway, with the Kansas City Royals. They also get Joey Wimmer in the deal. Good young prospect there. I like the addition there. Overall, 2 really good pieces for them to acquire to help improve a struggling offense. And India, though, is the best piece for me going back the other way. Now, as far as what exactly is Cincinnati getting out of it, well, they're getting a starting pitcher. They needed some starting pitching when they entered this winter, and they ultimately get it deal done. I know last offseason they were hoping to get one of the top of the pitchers off of the Seattle Mariners in exchange for Jonathan India. Seattle wasn't going to give up Logan Gilbert. They weren't going to give up Wu in exchange for Jonathan India. And ultimately, more had to be attached to India to even get a guy like Singer. But Singer had found himself on the way out anyway in Kansas City after so many different moves to help improve that rotation. Happened over the last year and a half. The trade that brought Cole Ragans certainly helped solidify that rotation. Then bringing in Waka, Seth Lugo, among others, certainly helped give them a lot more depth than they had had in years past. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas City continued to deal from that starting pitching depth. Now, of course, they could still go back out there in free agency and kind of add another starter or two or three or four to beef up the very back end of that rotation as they get to the final days of free agency. But the Royals are not afraid to spend. They were the second highest spending team in free agency last year, and this trade really does give them the answers they have, or the answers they've been looking for in that starting lineup. Good trade all the way around. I like it best for Kansas City because it solves the biggest need and solves the bigger issue for Jonathan India himself. I think he's going to be a better player than what he was the last couple of years in Cincinnati, just due to the fact that he's not having that cloud constantly hang over him over, hey, you're the guy that's the odd man out here quite clearly, so you got your bags packed, when you going to get traded, you heard anything? That's all he's been hearing for basically the last 2 years, and so finally having a place where he knows he's going to be playing every day in that starting lineup, I think is really going to help improve the production that we're seeing from Jonathan India. Let us know in the comment section what you think of the trade overall. For me, I'm going to give this one an A+ for the Kansas City Royals. It's very rare for me to give an A+, but when you're dealing with the starting pitching depth that they have, they gave from a position of strength, something that they're not going to necessarily miss when it comes to say the 162 game season next year. They might have used Singer for one of those 4 or 5 rotation spots, but for me, for the production that they were going to get out of him versus what they're going to sign to fill his spot in the rotation is far less significant than the impact that Jonathan India alone is going to have in that lineup. Good on-base percentage guy, great speed, and I think he's going to really improve what the Kansas City Royals do well or do best, and that's get on base, move the runners over, those kinds of things. They haven't really had those types of players outside of Bobby Witt. Remember when they went to the World Series, all those contending teams, they were based off of speed predominantly, and Jonathan India fits that type of player mold anyway that they want to go for. Now, stolen bases are up across the sport anyway over the last year or so with the rule changes. Having more speed is going to help a team like Kansas City, and I do expect them to improve, especially off of what they did last year. I'm expecting them to be at least a wild card team next season. Now, of course, the Guardians are going to try to sell out and win the division. It remains to be seen if they have another great year in them. I think they will. I think they're going to do big things this offseason, but I think the Royals are going to be right there. Welcome in Vita for Life. Surprise news is so slow to come out on tenders. I agree. I don't like to divulge too much as far as what's going on as work and whatnot, but I'll just say it was a very hectic day. And I did not get to check my phone at all. The only thing I saw was the India trade. And then when I finally got home, I got to look for all the non-tenders. And I was sitting there going, is my phone not refreshing? Where's all these moves? And then I finally come over to the studio and whatnot, and I look and I got a few more headlines. But we're still waiting for more and more of these to drop. I mean, let me go ahead and update our page here that I have sitting on the side. And nothing still has been updated in about an hour now on the website. Some other non-tenders that we've seen, a big one of note anyway, is the Nationals have decided to non-tender Kyle Finnegan. Now, I saw a bunch of articles out there that the Nationals might ultimately trade him this offseason, so it's not exactly a surprise that the Nationals weren't keeping him, but it is a surprise that they're giving him up for literally nothing. Now, whether you could believe that they were going to get whatever they wanted as far as a trade, or if they had a price that they're hoping to get as far as value back, obviously they would rather not take the risk of being stuck with his salary next season. They're looking to trim a little bit of salary here, and while I think it's a good idea for them, as they're not going to be contending to try to conserve that money right now, while they still have a good young roster, and giving away top bullpen arms isn't exactly a way to solidify a young rotation. Now, I do expect them to still add to this bullpen. I don't think it's the end of the world for the Nationals, but I do think it's one of the more surprising moves out there along with Jordan Romano. Maybe they're just seeing that the so many relief pitchers on the market. Why are we paying this much for a guy who's injured or coming off of a poor season, whatever the case may be, rather than just going out and getting a guy who has a similar issue right now and paying him less by signing him to a free agent deal. Maybe that's the thought process for teams here, more specifically for the Blue Jays and Nationals. But those are two of the more surprising moves that we've seen. Other non-tenders, the Angels have decided to non-tender Patrick Sandoval. A little bit surprised because Patrick Sandoval, to me, was a good depth starter for them, a 3-4-5 piece. I know some Angels fans got on here in years past saying, oh, he has great stuff. He could be a potential number 2 on a World Series team. What are you smoking, man? I mean, he's good, don't get me wrong, but he's not a difference-making player for me, and he never has been. He hasn't shown the ability to do it at any consistent level since he's come to the major leagues. And the reason why it's a surprise for a non-tender is that the Angels aren't looking for a number 2 starter in their rotation. They're looking for innings, guys that can get outs. And Sandoval was a guy that could give you some length at times. He's going to get blown up every now and again, which is fine. You weren't expecting to win 100 games this year anyway. But your rotation's going to be young if you get rid of guys that are like this on the that are a little bit older on your roster. Now, they could go to free agency and just sign a couple of guys for $2 to $4 million. Maybe they even ring back Patrick Sandoval here. But I thought that one was a little bit of a surprise as well. Let me go ahead and pull up the page here. This was the page from MLBTradeRumors.com as far as names that could be non-tendered. And so we'll start at the top with the catchers. This was some of the names that they thought could be non-tendered. None of them are really earth-shattering names. Same thing for first base. Gavin Sheets was one of the names that could have been non-tendered. I believe he was non-tendered today. But again, only $2.6 million. Not exactly shocking the world. One move that got a little bit of a headline out there was the Nick Madrigal non-tender by the Chicago Cubs. Only $2 million. A little bit surprising that they didn't try to find a suitor for him via trade. Even if you're just getting a bag of chips, it'd been better than losing him for nothing. Ultimately, he's going to go into free agency. I think teams that are struggling, like the LA Angels, would be a good fit for him if they can get him to be a positive performer on a team. That's obviously worth the investment there. And if he gets back to being the player that we thought he was going to be coming in to Major League Baseball out of the draft, they would really have something. But I think the Cubs are looking to try to contend, and they see this as an opportunity to free up a 40-man roster spot rather than a position of trying to save money. So maybe that's the reason why they viewed that as a good move for them. Third base, a Yankee, John Birdie anyway, I believe was non-tendered. Josh Rojas was non-tendered by the Mariners. Not too surprising on that one. For $4.3 million, I think you could get similar levels of production out of a minor league guy. And he did show a little bit more life with the bat this year than he had in years past. But maybe the Mariners want to bring him back at a lower cost or a long-term deal. But in either event, they decided to non-tender him, at least as of right now. Shortstops, the one I'm looking at is Jorge Mateo. I have not heard any news yet on Jorge Mateo. He had some good moments there with the Orioles the last several years. Wade, I believe, signed a one-year deal to avoid arbitration, and be non-tendered. Center fielders, they have Leody Taveras on this list. He was actually tendered a contract, so he will not be a free agent. Just kind of going down this list. Haggerty, I believe, was non-tendered. Laureano, anyway, was non-tendered as well. Yastrzemski's the one I haven't heard any news yet. That's a $9.5 million deal, a non-tender anyway, that could happen for the San Francisco Giants. I think that one could be the biggest move as far as those corner outfielders, aside from Austin Hayes. Hayes was non-tendered a contract by the Phillies. Remember, he had the illness anyway in the second half of the year after he was traded from the Baltimore Orioles to the Phillies. Ultimately did not work out there, obviously. So he's going to be a nice get, I believe, for a contender out there that's looking for a fourth outfielder, third outfielder, somewhere in that range, a DH guy who has a good bat. And he's going to have to prove that he still has that good bat in order to get a long-term deal going forward. But I think you could probably sign him for, say, a one-year, $3 million prove-it deal. And that wouldn't be a breaking-the-bank type of a move for any of these contenders out there. Some of those teams that are cash-strapped, they're looking to improve their offense. Austin Hayes could be a piece for one of those teams. Starting pitchers. We mentioned Griffin Canning has been non-tendered by the Braves. $5.1 million for a depth guy, a number 5-6 starter for them. I thought that was a little bit surprising, especially when you consider that they're going to need more depth starters just like Griffin Canning. Maybe they just want to save a little bit more money. Remains to be seen. The one surprise move that I'll say that was signed to a one-year deal that avoided arbitration and avoided a non-tender was the Texas Rangers and starting pitcher Dane Dunning. Dane Dunning was expected to get a $4.4 million tender, either that or ultimately be non-tendered. Ultimately, they got a deal done. I believe the number came in at $2.9 million, a $1.5 million decision by Dane Dunning to stay with the Texas Rangers. A little bit surprised that he decided to take that money because he's been a productive starting pitcher. He doesn't necessarily throw with great velocity, but he had shown that strikeout numbers, when you give him the ball every fifth day as as number 4, as a number 5 starter in your rotation, he can be a very productive pitcher for you. Now, like I said, he's not going to blow you away. He's not going to throw 100 and so forth, but he's a different type of pitcher, and those pitchers don't really get paid. But even at $4 million, I'm surprised that Dane Dunning was willing to stay with Texas when they clearly don't believe in him as a starter. Sure, he's a depth option. Sure, he's there for the long relief role for the Texas Rangers. But Bruce Bochy, Mike Maddox, Chris Young all value stuff. They all value velocity. They all value limiting walks. They all value strikeouts. Dane Dunning does a nice job at avoiding avoiding walks. Everything else, though, those are issues that the front office there and the coaching staff all believe are issues for Dane Dunning. So that's why I was surprised he did not decide to go ahead and test the waters. I think it could have easily gotten a guaranteed starting job somewhere else as a number 4 or 5 starter. And if he was able to be given that opportunity, I could think he could have been a number 3 eventually with some more, a greater track record, consistency being in that rotation week in and week out, rather than, hey, this week we're going to have you starting, then we're going to put you in the bullpen, but we're not going to use you for 3 weeks. Then we're going to throw you back out there as a starter and wonder why you didn't pitch well. That's kind of what he's been in for the last year or so with the Texas Rangers. And I think by signing that $2.9 million deal with the Rangers, I think he's in for more of the same. I really liked him as a prospect all those years ago as part of I want to say it was the Adam Eaton deal that sent him from the Nationals to the White Sox, and then the Lance Lynn deal that sent him from the White Sox to the Rangers. But I would say that it was time for him to move on from my favorite team anyway, the Texas Rangers. I don't think they had done him well, and I think Dane Dunning still is a good pitcher, but I think he needs an opportunity to be able to go out there every fifth day. But ultimately decides to stay with Texas. $2.9 million. Maybe he just likes his home there in Texas, but we'll see how he does next year. You like Brian De La Garza and Connor Joe for the Pirates. Both got non-tendered. I had not seen the Pirates news yet. That is a little bit surprising. We saw the trade last year. I believe it was the trade anyway that sent De La Cruz from the Marlins to the Pirates. Connor Joe, former Rocky, had a good year 2 years ago with the Pirates. Last year was not great for the Pirates. They're looking to improve offense, and so they're going to have to free up some roster spots. I think this is more about freeing up roster spots more than anything else. They could easily bring back those guys. I think they would be good fits in that clubhouse for them. Connor Joe specifically. I think he can play literally everywhere in the outfield, play a little bit of infield for you as well. De La Cruz, I think, would be a nice piece for them eventually, but I think they're looking to get a little bit better production. So unless they're unable to improve that offense, I think those guys could be out the door permanently, but we shall see. Tristan McKenzie on this list did get a contract done with the Cleveland Guardians. He was not non-tendered as well. And then Huskar Yana, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name anyway, from the Braves. He was non-tendered as well. The Braves like to clean out the back end of their roster right around the non-tender deadline. We saw that last year with the trade to the Chicago White Sox, sending 6 players to the White Sox in exchange for a reliever. So a good move, I believe, by the Braves, cleaning out their roster, cycling through things, but a little bit surprised that some of the pieces that they're allowing go out their door. Welcome back, Sarah. Appreciate you joining us once again. Not surprised Lars and Helsley tendered. Not surprised either. Helsley, though, I think is going to find his way to another team this year. I would be shocked if the Cardinals kept him. It sounds like the Cardinals are going to be rebuilding this year. So I apologize to you Cardinal fans out there. Sarah, I know you love your Cardinals. But this is probably the first time, probably even since you've been alive, that they've actually, that they're going to be going through a legitimate rebuild, at least for one season. They always have to be in contention. They're always pushing for a wild card or better. And this might be a whole new experience for those of you who are younger Cardinals fans. So hopefully you don't have a 5-year stint like some of these teams out there, or even longer. But 1 year, if you're able to turn around that fast, you'd be the exception, not the rule. I expect Nolan Arenado to be moved at some point. Helsley, I expect to be moved before the season. I doubt Goldschmidt goes back, but we'll see how things work out for the Cardinals. But we'll see. We'll see where they go, what decisions they make. They are in a tough division. All 5 teams are at least competing in some degree or another. Pirates, of course, have the pitching. They're looking for some hitting. Cubs need a little bit of help on both sides, and especially in the bullpen, but they have the money already invested in some key spots. They're looking to move off of Bellinger. The Reds made a move today, bringing in Singer to help strengthen that rotation. They have a good young core offensively. And then the division winner last year was the Milwaukee Brewers. Great young offensive team, but they need some starting pitching. That's a good division. It's not necessarily top heavy with a Dodgers or a Yankees or an Orioles at the top of the division, but it is still very strong top to bottom. The Cardinals, the weakest of that group, they need to kind of strengthen that team overall. Some of the aging players need to move on. They need to allow some of those younger players to take everyday at bats rather than let their roster be clogged by some of those older veterans. They need to shuffle things around a little bit. So we'll see how things ultimately move for the Cardinals this offseason. All right, let's go ahead and flip over to the MLB Trade Network, or the MLB Trade Rumors site here, and just see if they've updated any more of the Nontenders. Kyle Farmer agrees to a deal with the Rockies. 1-year deal with an option. That is a major league deal. Good depth piece for them. I think this is kind of the replacement for Brendan Rodgers for the Colorado Rockies. I'm a little surprised they decided to turn the page here, but I think Farmer's a good get for them. Give them some good veteran at bats here and there. Be the veteran in the clubhouse with Charlie Blackmon retiring, and it's still a long road for the Rockies to contention, but they're at least making some interesting moves. I wouldn't say they're correct, but this move I do like for them, especially with some of the moves they have made, whether you agree with them or not. But I think he's a good move for them to get things going. Glad Contreras is going to be your first baseman. Well, they didn't like him behind the plate, that's for sure. I mean, within the first month of you guys signing him to that 5-year, $78 million deal, I believe is what it was, when they brought in Contreras from the Cubs, they basically immediately take him out from behind home plate saying, hey, you can't handle a pitching staff. You're the reason why this pitching staff is so erratic. And then you basically put him back in there a week later saying, I guess he wasn't so bad. But for me, getting him out from behind the plate, I don't think necessarily was your biggest problem. I think it just gives you another clog in the lineup, if you will. I think you could have still kept him there at catcher. But, if you're looking to improve your pitchers, I suppose, maybe he's not the right answer for you. That's a tough question for the Cardinals. I mean, I would just keep the bat in the lineup, maybe put him at DH. I don't know. It's a transition period for the Cardinals. Herrera is going to be a good catcher for you. I agree. But India, though, that's why I said the trade for the Royals was an A+. I guess I didn't give you the B side of that. How I thought the Reds did in that one, I'm going to give it a solid B. They got some depth as far as a starting pitcher. They finally got rid of a headache on their team. Not necessarily that India was a problem, but I think them constantly having to deal with the rumor mill around him and what are you going to do? What are you not going to do? What are you looking for? How soon can this all happen? I think just turning the page, letting this team kind of grow a little bit, let those players sit in their natural positions a little bit more, not have to worry about if they're going to lose at bats to India starting for them one day or over another. But I think the move for them is a solid B. I think they probably could have gotten a little bit more for India. I think that them having to attach Wimmer to that kind of hurts the return anyway of Singer. I thought they could have gotten a little bit better of a starter out of it, but they got a good starting pitcher, a 4-5 for that rotation, and it does give them some depth and gets rid of some problematic lineup construction questions that they would have had they not made the deal. Yes, I couldn't agree more. Wynn is absolutely a stud. I would have put him probably in the 4th, 5th spot. I could see a spot for him being 3rd in the Rookie of the Year balloting. I can't remember if it was this year or last anyway. But he's been very good since he's come up. I want to say it was this year he was a rookie. Let me see here. Just want to check one other thing. One thing I'm looking for here is just to look at the salaries and see if there's any obvious non-tender guys that might have been overlooked or that we weren't really considering. Nobody really jumps out to me. The only one is possibly the starter, the reliever David Bednar from the Pirates, but he wasn't going anywhere. Injury would have been the biggest reason, and I didn't I don't think there was a real reason for him to go. The bigger salary was Jordan Romano, $7.75 million. Cal Quantrill at $9 million for the Rockies. I guess salary is the biggest reason why they moved off of him, but still for $9 million, I mean a win is worth $1 million. So you're saying he's not worth $1 million to have him in your starting rotation, or one win to have him in your starting rotation? Mark Leiter Jr. Yeah, that's another one. All right, we'll refresh this page one more time, and then we'll kind of go into our final thoughts here today. Still nothing new. Okay. So we've posted a video earlier today about Cody Bellinger, the Chicago Cubs, being on the market. We floated the idea of the Seattle Mariners bringing him in. Now, the Mariners have been connected to him in years past when he was a member of the LA Dodgers and hit free agency. They basically finished up as a bridesmaid in that pursuit. Ultimately, last year, they ended up as a bridesmaid again. They are interested in bringing in Cody Bellinger. After things didn't work out in Chicago, I'm sure they'd love to pivot and see how much money they can save off the Chicago Cubs by having them eat some of that deal and still bring in the player that they would have liked to have all along. Now, where else could he go? Teams that need first base, center field, DH help are all fits for a guy like Cody Bellinger. There was thought around the Texas Rangers, anyway, a couple of years ago that Bellinger would have been a good fit there. I wasn't necessarily a believer of it at the time anyway. They were looking to improve their rotation at the time, not necessarily solve their offensive issues. They had just spent money on Seager and Semien the offseason prior. And now's the time that they could be looking to add some offense again. They're looking for a complement, if you will, to Nathaniel Lowe at first base. I'm not sure how well that complements him, but I think Bellinger could be an easy corner outfielder, center fielder for you, and split time out there with Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, Adolis Garcia, and get some time at DH as well. They have Josh Smith there, but he really struggled in the second half, even though he was probably their best bat, most consistent bat in the first half. But the bigger question for the Rangers is, are they going to be able to stay healthy? Josh Young at third base is a good offensive bat, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy the last couple of years. And if he has another year like that, Rangers need to find a long-term answer there. So Young's got to put together a healthy season. If he can, great. Rangers have that position locked up. If he's unable to stay healthy once again, we could see the Rangers looking to add a third baseman at the deadline. Maybe a guy like Nolan Arenado could be a fit in Texas if Young gets hurt again. But as far as the Bellinger, I think Bellinger discussion anyway, the Rangers I think are on the periphery of that. They're looking to improve that roster offensively. Depending on how much the Cubs would be willing to eat off of that salary, they could make it work. And remember, the Rangers have about $40 million to spend this offseason. Say the Cubs are looking for a starting pitcher. Maybe you send John Gray back the other way, free up some money from Texas. Maybe the Cubs chip in $5 million for Bellinger, and then basically it's a salary neutral trade. Rangers still keep $40 million to spend this offseason. They add a bat to that lineup, and then they have more money to go out there and bring back an Eovaldi and a Heaney. They still have to solve their bullpen and catcher spots, and maybe add one more offensive piece. But that's kind of the offseason in a nutshell for Texas. For Seattle, I think they have to add at least a couple of bats to that lineup. They did some good additions at the trade deadline last year. I thought Justin Turner was going to be a good piece for them. At times he was, but I think everybody would agree that the Mariners didn't really get the job done when it comes to improving that lineup. They need to make some big-time additions to that organization. They swung and missed on several free agents over the years. They never really were in the market for a guy like Aaron Judge or a Shohei Otani, but they were at least on the periphery of that discussion. I don't think they were even a top 5 finisher in either of those races, but they need to bring in some consistent at-bats. A guy like Cody Bellinger would at least lengthen out that lineup, and they have to find a way to keep Julio Rodriguez in that lineup and to protect him in that lineup. If they solve those two questions, we could be talking about the Mariners being the favorite in the American League. And yes, I'm even referring to teams like the Baltimore Orioles and the New York Yankees, Cleveland Guardians, even my own Texas Rangers, Houston Astros, etc. I think they would have a legitimate case to be considered the favorite on the American League side if they could only figure out that lineup. That's their their real bugaboo. They have a good 1 through 5 in their rotation. They have a solid bullpen. I think they have to address that starting lineup, and if they do, we could really be considering them an AL favorite. But we'll see. They have to get the job done first. They've failed to do so the last couple of years, and the ball's in their court. Cal Raleigh, I couldn't agree more there, Sarah. He's a good leader on that team as well. He speaks out against their management when he views them as doing something wrong, but he'll stick up for his teammates. He'll stick up for that front office. Just like I said, if he views them as doing something wrong, he'll call them out for doing something well in addition to that. So, but Cal Raleigh is an underrated catcher. Great power as well. Welcome in, John. Sorry, I just saw your comment there. With Tyler Mahle coming back next year, do you think this allows us to focus on developing younger pitchers in the organization? My answer is going to be two parts. First, Tyler Mahle is coming off of injury. You can't really count on him for 32 starts. So, with that being said, I would say you'd count on him for 20 and say, hey, if you get that out of him for $17 million this year, and the production that you're expecting out of him, you're doing well. You're talking about having Jacob deGrom only having 3 starts last year as well. 20 starts, I think, is what you could reasonably expect next season out of Jacob deGrom. If you get more than that, great. But I think 20 is what you're hoping for. The rest of your starters, you got John Gray, who missed time at multiple points last year. You have very inexperienced guys in Cody Bradford, and even less experienced guy in Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter. They need some more starting pitchers. If they go into the season with what they've got right now, they have a good 1 through 5, 1 through 6, but the first injury, back to where you were last year. Instant injury issues. Now, they had the depth last year with all the offseason acquisitions that they made. Cody Bradford won a spot out of the spring training. He pitched great in the month of April. Was out for like the next couple of months. Scherzer was able to pitch for them at certain points of the season last year. When he was healthy, he was good, except for a couple of games when he got a home run happy anyway, giving up home run balls. But injuries, kept him out of the lineup quite a bit. Eovaldi missed about a month as well. Heaney was probably the most consistent pitcher, but he's now a free agent. That's how many pitchers they had in addition to what they have on the roster now for what they were able to use last year. Now, Mahle came back, around the trade deadline a little bit after, and ultimately looked good in his 3 starts, but he wound up right back on the injured list and didn't make another start after that. So, they need to add some starting pitching. So, to answer the second part of that question anyway, the second part of my answer anyway, does this mean it allows them to focus on developing younger pitchers? I think if they have more depth, it'll allow them to keep guys like Owen White in the minor leagues and not have to rely on them as far as being a call-up. They just signed Dane Dunning, 1 year, $2.9 million, to be a depth option spot starter for them. I think they don't view him as a starting pitcher on their roster right now, which is why I'm surprised he accepted that deal. But maybe he just wants to stay in Texas. But they at least have a depth option already on the Major League roster that allows them to keep some of those guys who aren't ready or guys who had a poor spring training. Say Jack Leiter comes in and is giving up, an 8 earned run average in spring training. You're obviously not going to break camp with him in your rotation. He's probably going to start the season at AAA, get things figured out, and then be back up there by May. If those young pitchers come into spring training and look hot, Kumar Rocker looks every bit as good as he did this year. Kumar Rocker, I think, breaks camp with you as one of your starters this year. If Jack Leiter comes into the season or comes into spring training and throws, say, a 3.5 to 4 ERA in spring training, looks good, location's good, velocity's good, I think he breaks camp as a member of your rotation. I think John Gray breaks camp as a member of your rotation. I think Jacob deGrom, obviously, if he's healthy. And then you're talking about Tyler Mahle. But I'm not expecting all of those guys to, A, be healthy, or B, have good enough spring trainings to qualify for one of those rotation spots. I do like them to bring back one or both of Eovaldi and Heaney. I think everybody is overlooking the production Heaney has. I know his ERA isn't great. I get that. It's a 4.2, 4.5, something like that. But he went out there and took the ball every time the Rangers asked him to do so. He was great, and his stuff really does play up in those postseason situations, which is why the Rangers value him more than they do a guy like Dane Dunning. $2.9 million is what they value Dane Dunning at, the depth he provides them. Andrew Heaney, I guarantee if they offered him 2 years, 25, which was what they offered him a couple of years ago when they signed him originally, I think they would be ecstatic with something like that. Now, the market I don't think is going to go too much higher on a guy like Heaney, which is why I think if they get 2 years, $25 million for Heaney, they would be over the moon to be able to bring him back for roughly 12 to 15 per. Now, as far as Eovaldi, he's getting a little older, a little long in the tooth. Injury issues are a little different now than they were, say, a couple of years ago when he signed with Texas. But he's looking for a nice pay bump after winning the Rangers a World Series. Now, what could he command? I think we're talking anywhere between $20 to $30 million a year for Eovaldi, $30 million on the high side. If some of these big fish out there like the Dodgers, Mets, Yankees all miss on their top flight free agent target, say they miss on bringing in Juan Soto and he goes to a surprise team like the Red Sox, well then all three of those teams have money to spend and there's only so many free agents out there that can go for it. I think Eovaldi would see a nice uptick in his salary if that were to happen. No, I don't expect it to. I think he's probably going to end up with one of the Mets or Dodgers at this point. I think the Yankees are probably going to be outbid by those two teams. I think ultimately, if I had to handicap it, throw a dart, I would say the Dodgers ultimately win the sweepstakes for him just because of the money that Otani saved. They look like a World Series team for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Remember the Heatles? Remember the ESPN created their own webpage dedicated strictly to the Miami Heat. And because LeBron went there, Bosh went there, D-Wade was already there, it was the Heatles. That was the dynamic that was developed around the NBA. Miami became the villain. The New York Yankees of baseball back in the day, the evil empire. We could see that exact same thing now with the LA Dodgers. I mean, you're talking about the best player in the game, Shohei Otani, didn't even pitch this year. Which, by the way, he's a Cy Young caliber pitcher when he throws the ball. But when he hits, he just won you an MVP right now this year. That team looks so good. The deferred money right now is really going to help them be able to bring in top flight free agents. It looks like they're going to bring in Sasaki as well. This team is loaded and they're ready to win more World Series. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. Remember when Chris Bosh said that at the introductory pep rally, if you will, for the Miami Heat? That's what we're looking at for the LA Dodgers. I'm not saying they're going to have a 7-peat, but I am saying they have every case to be able to make that right now to us. I mean, we're talking about one of the best teams that's possibly been constructed in the last 15, 20 years. Shohei Otani is that big of a player, bringing in Glasnow, Yamamoto last year. They already have Betts and Freeman, all outside players for the most part. And now you're going to be able to bring in a guy like Sasaki, who's going to be young, coming in at 22, 23 years old. And if he hits that ace potential that we expect, you have another ace on your staff for the next 15 years. That's just an incredible championship window the Dodgers have really opened up for themselves. They took a couple of lumps by saving on money, bringing in Lance Lynn type players, those kinds of things. I do agree, Teoscar Hernandez would be a great get for them to bring him back. He is friends with Shohei Otani. He was the one player on that team Shohei really connected with. They do have an opening for an outfielder. But if they don't bring in Soto, I think Teoscar Hernandez is probably back there. If they do bring in Soto, I'm not sure there's a spot on the roster for him. But I'm sure if they found a way to get him in there, position him at one of the outfield spots, Soto at another corner outfield spot, find somebody to take some of these, onerous contracts at the back half of their deals anyway off of their books, we could see them make some moves like that. But money's not a big issue for the Dodgers. They look very good. But as far as the Eovaldi and Heaney conversation, I love both of those pitchers. The Rangers are, counting their lucky stars. They had Eovaldi after they brought in, multiple starters that offseason. Eovaldi was the last one to sign. They don't win a World Series without him. Just like they made the trade for Scherzer, they went ahead and made the trade anyway to bring in Jordan Montgomery. They don't win the World Series without those two starting pitchers. And they could ultimately both end up back on the Texas Rangers this offseason. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight. It's almost 10 o'clock. We'll be live for you guys again tomorrow night. We'll start a little earlier, but make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. We'll update our page one more time just to see if anything else is happening right now. Doesn't look like it is, but we'll go over the rest of the non-tenders tomorrow night as well. We'll get into some trade discussions, kind of break down where rosters are at, what teams are looking for as we head into the winter meetings. And remember, we'll be live for you guys throughout the winter meetings. We'll even try to go to the actual winter meetings there, see if we're going to be able to broadcast from there or not. I've got a few calls in to some officials I'm waiting to hear back from, And if we're able to get some clearance, I will be at the winter meetings at the hotel. Worst case scenario, if I'm unable to get those, I will be live for you guys here in our studio, breaking down all the latest signings, the rumors, everything. I have already taken off of work so I can make sure that I'll be here for you guys. I love the winter meetings, one of my favorite times of year in baseball. In fact, it's probably my favorite time of year because that's when the most transactions happen. Usually, hopefully we have a little bit more active winter meetings than we did last year. We enter every single offseason saying, oh, this is the year we're going to have lots of activity at the winter meetings. Last year was a bit of a dud. And hopefully this year with Scott Boras having so many pieces out there, I think he's going to be the guy that's going to do what he did with Albert Pujols, throw the money on the table and say, all right, we won this. I'm back. I'm the best agent in the game. Let me tell you all about it. But welcome back, Paul. Glad to see you back. Yeah, I'm back. We'll be live for you guys every day all the way through the winter meetings, and then we'll be live for you guys weekdays after that. Kyle Finnegan, that was one of the surprises out there, along with Jordan Romano. Those were my two bullpen-related non-tenders that were a little bit surprising. Rockies with a couple more surprises in Quantrill and Rogers. Braves with a couple surprises out there as well, Griffin Canning. But appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Thank you guys for being with us. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night.